Well, you might be surprised to learn that Malcolm Turnbull had his hands deep inside all of this from the very, very beginning. And of course, everything he touches turns to gold. Now, how can you say that what you're doing is for the environment when, number one, you don't have a definition of what the environment is, and every litre of water that's being used over there is no longer available to the environment over here?
Are they actually trying to play farmer, or are they pretending to do it and just saying, oh, we made a mistake, we didn't know what we're doing? I think that's a bit unfortunate, because the smaller the farm, the more personalised it is, and it brings back that community spirit, because you'll have more people living in those smaller communities, and we're seeing those communities turn into ghost towns at the moment. We want to rejuvenate them.
Rikkie-Lee Tyrell MLC, member of the Upper House of Parliament of Victoria. Thank you for inviting me out here. We're at the Hume Weir, and I've got to say, you've kind of given me like this full circle moment, because in my very first video that I ever did, which was all about water, and we're going to be talking all about water today, I stood in front of a weir outside of Melbourne and talked about water supply, and here I am now, what is this, 17 years later?
Wow.
Yeah, I feel old too. And you call me up and you say, listen, let's talk about water. Where? In front of a weir. Okay, here I am 17 years later, but it's good to see you.
No, thank you for accepting my invitation.
You're not wearing orange?
No, I'm not yet.
I thought orange was the new black.
Nearly.
How do you feel about blue?
I like it.
You like blue?
Yeah, it's a beautiful colour.
Well, that's good, because I brought you something blue. This is one of my new ones that I just brought into stock. Ta-da! Shameless self-promotion. There you go. That's for you. What just dropped?
That's really good.
I think the tag just fell off it. Now, it says, don't make me repeat myself. And it's history saying, don't make me repeat myself. And I thought it was kind of appropriate, because what's going on with water and the irrigators being screwed over and the Murray-Darling Basin plan turning into an absolute debacle is history repeating itself.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think kind of gets lost in all the argument over who gets what water, and the whole point of the Murray-Darling Basin, the whole point of the authority being formed by the Water Act of 2007 was that up until then, water had been this big argument between the states. So the Murray-Darling Basin, for those who may not know, it covers a significant amount of inland and southern sort of southwest Queensland, basically almost all of inland New South Wales, a pretty big chunk of northern Victoria, and then a little bit of the bottom right, the southeast corner of South Australia. So there's 4 different states that are kind of captured inside this thing that we call the Murray-Darling Basin. And inevitably there was all this sort of finger pointing over who's taking too much water and how much water is the right amount of water, all that stuff. And when you had 4 different states involved, there was a lot of conflict. The whole premise, the whole promise of the Murray-Darling Basin Authority was, by taking water management out of states' hands and putting it into the federal government's hands, they were going to be able to stop all the division, stop all the squabbling, and if you believe the Murray-Darling Basin plan itself, achieve a triple bottom line outcome where it was going to be good for irrigators, good for the communities that exist out in rural and regional areas, and also good for the environment. So I would say there were 4 key promises. You know, I think it fails on all 4.
They have not delivered
anything.
No, not delivered at all.
The division is, if anything, worse than ever before. And this is probably a good place to start, because when we talk about irrigation water, the Murray-Darling Basin, it provides, look, my numbers are probably a few years out of date now, but something like 40% of Australia's produce, our food and fibre, comes out of this basin. It's a very large physical area. It's a very important area from a economic point of view, but also from a national security point of view. Like, you can't call yourself a sovereign country if you can't feed yourself.
No, and it's called the food bowl for a reason.
Yeah.
Initially, before the Murray-Darling Basin plan came in, it was feeding Australia.
Yeah.
It was producing.
That's literally true.
Well.
Yeah, that's literally true. We were able to export enormous amounts of food to other parts of the world, which of course then helps with hunger globally, because it keeps international staple food prices down and has all those wonderful knock-on effects. But what's happened, I think, since the Murray-Darling Basin plan, since it became a federal issue, is the division between the different parts of the basin have actually become even more entrenched. And the accusations that go on and the nonsense that goes on. And I think the reason why that's happened is because the federal government is trying to take from everybody. So everybody's feeling squeezed, but they've done a really good job of making sure nobody blames them. Everyone blames each other.
Yeah, the states are at war over water. Well,
the states are at war over water, but you talk to anyone in, let's say, southern New South Wales in the regulated irrigated district, and we'll cover what that is in a second, they're going to tell you that it's the floodplain harvesters that are the problem. And if you talk to somebody in South Australia, they're going to tell you that it's the Victorians that are the problem because they're taking the most. And you talk to different people in the basin, everyone's pointing fingers at absolutely everybody else. And I think that's actually by design. I think division amongst us as Australians and water users in this particular particular case. I think it's kind of part of the political modus operandi. I don't know. You're in the building in Victoria anyway. You're in Spring Street.
I am. Yeah, look, just from my constituents on the ground, since I've been involved in politics. So 2019, I initially joined politics, and it was because of water.
Yeah.
And learning about it, you actually were the one who shone the most light on it for me. So thank you. You did a really good job of explaining it. It was plain to see that, yes, the states are at war over water, and the bad guy in the room was actually the federal government.
Yeah, that's the reality, yes.
They were the bad guy in the room, and I'm trying to get all the states to listen, like just little old me before I even got elected into Parliament. I'm like, no, it's, you've got to focus on the cause of this, and that's them. It's such a mess. It is such a mess.
We'll get back to Rikkie-Lee Tyrell and water issues in just a moment, but in case you didn't know, this, the small size, is the last of the Good People Break Bad Laws hoodies that we will ever have in the original design. We've sold out of all the other sizes. This is all we have left. It's the small. It's got the Topher field on the sleeve. It's got the original Good People Break Bad Laws design, the same as I'm wearing in the t-shirt here. But in the hoodie, it is small or bust. It's the only thing we have. So if you are a small, or if you know somebody who is a small, click the link in the description and get one of these before they sell out. It's literally, you will be among the very last people ever to get an original Good People Break Bad Laws hoodie, and only if you fit a small. Now, if you are a little bit larger, like myself, we do still have the t-shirt in the men's cut available in every size except for extra large. We're getting low. Extra large is gone. Sorry about that, guys. This is the large that I'm wearing right now. It's a little bit snug on me, but I'm getting away with it. And we do have all of the other sizes besides extra large. Now, we did make this in the ladies' tee as well. That is available in all sizes in the ladies' tee. So if you would like to get an original Good People Break Bad Laws design, these are actually going for $19 right now. Same with the ladies' tees, $19. And these smalls, they're down to $99 for, like I said, the last of the original Good People Break Bad Laws hoodies. So you'll be helping me to clear out some shelf space, get rid of the last of some of my original stock, which I absolutely love, but times move on and we are having to move on to new designs as well. And you'll be getting beautiful, beautiful, high quality garments with a powerful message and helping me to keep the Topher Project going and growing. So check out the links in the description. Also take a moment to check out the Buy Me a Coffee option if you want to help me stay caffeinated, as well as my best-selling books and all of my other merch. And everything you buy helps me to keep doing interviews and stories and bringing you important topics like irrigation water in Australia. So without further ado, let's get back to Rikkie-Lee Tyrell.
And for as long as we, and I say we, I'm not an irrigator myself, I have no actual, this is the funny thing, people are like, oh, you got into water because, like, do you own land, do you have family history? No, none of the above. I saw it and it pissed me off, and I think it's important. I like food, I like to be able to eat good quality, locally Australian grown food. And I care about people not being screwed over for no good reason.
That was a very good reason to get into it. That's great because you're not in that community, whereas I was an irrigator, but I was new to it. We hadn't lived on the Murray-Darling Basin, and when we moved to the Murray-Darling Basin, I was so shocked. I was like, what's going on here? Because the river was full and it was hankering. And people were saying, I can't afford water. There's no water. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? And I'm like, why are all my neighbours leaving their farms because they can't afford water? And I just started asking questions, and the mess that I found, I'm like, how are we going to fix this? And it's like somebody's got a jar and they've dropped it and it has smashed, and I'm looking at all these pieces thinking we're going to have to glue these back bit by bit. I
actually think we need to get out a broom and just sweep it all away and actually start again. I think that's the reality of it, but that's not likely to happen.
Not now that we've got foreign investors involved as well.
Look, I actually think that can be cleaned up more easily than people think. That's not the biggest issue. The biggest issue is that the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, the Water Act of 2007, was a joint project between the Liberal Party, the National Party, the Labor Party, and the Greens. They all signed on to it. And so they've all got ego at stake, and they've all got kind of history wrapped up in the success of this thing. And you won't be surprised to learn that Malcolm Turnbull had his hands deep inside all of this from the very, very beginning. And of course, everything he touches turns to gold for the bankers that trade the things
at the expense of Australians.
So what happened in the Water Act of 2007 was a couple of crucial things, and I kind of need to give this background so that we can have a more constructive conversation about what to do about this. And I'm going to assume, guys, that you haven't necessarily seen all my videos about this. And if you find yourself a bit lost and kind of like, hang on, I didn't quite catch that, I've done a heap of videos on this, so just Google Topher Field water videos.
You were much younger.
I was much younger and much skinnier, although I am reverting slowly back towards my skinny self. I'm working on that. So what happened in 2007 was previously, the right to a certain allocation of water or a certain volume of water was tied directly to the land that you owned. And that has advantages, and it does actually have some disadvantages. There's reasons why some people might want more or less water, and the inability to trade that can be a problem. And so along came Malcolm Turnbull and the Water Act of 2007, and along with creating the Murray-Darling Basin Authority, who were then going to be basically play God with our water and make all of the decisions, because that's never gone wrong before, they also disconnected water from land so that it could be traded. Now the argument was, and I have some sympathy for this argument to be clear, I think they've done it terribly, but I have some sympathy for the argument, that way you can allocate the resource to where it is the most valuable. If someone wants to use their land in a way that's really water intensive, they should be able to get more water onto that land. If someone else goes, you know what, I'm going to pivot over here and I don't need water, they should be able to sell that off as an asset or sell off the temporary water on a year-by-year basis. And where it gets complicated for non-irrigators, and I am a non-irrigator, I'm a city boy, water is an incredibly complex thing. Water arrives on the farm through an irrigation channel or through a pump out of a river. Okay, nice and simple. Not so much. See, what we have are water rights, and you can probably fill me in because I'm probably going to get a bit of this a little bit wrong here, because it is actually different in different parts of the basin as well, and we'll cover that in a second. But essentially, someone who owns a water right, they have bought a certain volume of water, but actually they don't own that water. What they own is the right to an allocation when allocations are then actually distributed. So if they buy a thing called permanent water, that means that year after year they're going to get another allocation of more water. Or you can buy temporary water, which is where you are genuinely just buying the water. Now that's water that's already been allocated. So someone in this case isn't selling the license to the water, they are literally selling the water. Like I said, it gets a bit weird and complicated.
It's very complicated.
Then you have different zones, and trading between zones has certain restrictions on it, and obviously water can't get sold upriver, and there's various challenges around that. And then you have constraints in the river system itself, where sometimes the river, the Barmah Choke and various other locations in the river can actually run into just the physical natural capacity that they have to transport water.
They clog up.
Well, they clog up, yes. They fill up with this thing called water. Who knew that rivers would fill with water? But what happens then is, instead of the river naturally seasonally rising and falling, it ends up being run really hard all the time. And you mentioned a second ago, the river being full, but no one's getting water.
Yes.
Why is that? Well, one of the reasons, and I don't want to participate in the finger pointing, I'm just giving you an illustration of the things that happen. One of the things that's happened, because water was disconnected from land, is that a bunch of people came in and bought up relatively fertile land down in the Sunraysia region that didn't have water, and they bought the water rights, and they planted enormous amounts of almonds. And because they had half decent soil, although each area is different, but they had half decent soil, now they could buy the water. All of a sudden, almond plantations became a really profitable thing. The problem is that requires an enormous amount of water that used to be removed by irrigators further upstream to now make its way all the way downstream. And because these almond plantations, well, they're big money. A lot of these are international conglomerates. They're spending a lot of money. The plantations themselves cost a lot of money to set up, and then they have to give them water. If you don't give them water, if you take a year off and don't buy water for a year, you've lost all that investment. Mm-hmm. So they're willing to spend a fortune on that water, which means they can outbid your dairy farms. They can outbid your orchards. They can outbid a lot of these other, more sort of historical farming operations. And as a result, now those farming operations are saying, well, I can't get any water because I can't afford it. And they're watching this vast amount of water flow downstream, quite literally ripping out the banks of the Murray River in many places. The rate of erosion has been really terrible.
It's scary. Like, some points it's been a couple of metres a year, just in one season. Yeah. It's just eroding away.
Well, you go anywhere along the Murray here and you will see freshly exposed roots. There's another tree being slowly dragged into the river because it's just being eroded away. And that's how you end up with a situation where farmers who have been able to irrigate year after year for such a long time, now suddenly under this new system, they're watching a full river and all this water flowing past them all the way down to Sunraysia and into South Australia in some cases, and yet they've got crops dying, because they can't, or they're having to offload a bunch of their dairy herd because they can't actually sort of keep up the food and the fibre. Yeah. Cheap water then leads to cheap food. This is there's so much that just depends on water in order for our food and fibre to actually get grown. So that's what changed in 2007, and then we had the Murray-Darling Basin Authority come up with their plan, which was implemented in, I think, 2012 or 13. What this amounted to was basically $13 billion of taxpayers' money being allocated by the federal government for them to buy up water. So they would buy permanent water, and the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder would now own these water rights. Now, imagine, so essentially they were trying to buy up about 1/3 of the permanent water. That's what it amounts to. It's different in different places. Again, it's all very arcane and detailed, but broadly speaking, they're trying to buy up 1/3 of the irrigation water. Now, can you imagine what would happen to petrol prices if the government came in and took 1/3 of the petrol out of supply? Well, we don't have to imagine, because the Straits of Hormuz gave us a great example, right?
But we only had to do it for a little while.
That was only for a little while.
Very small amount of time.
But can you imagine they come along and it's permanent? The supply is restricted by 1/3 forever. What happens is essentially the Hunger Games. People desperate to get whatever they can, because if you're a logistics operator, you've invested in those trucks, you've got the bank payments to make, you've got to keep those trucks rolling, you've got to pay whatever price for the fuel, even if it makes it uneconomic for you to operate. Well, that's exactly the situation of, let's take a dairy farmer. They've invested, maybe $2 million in a couple of rotary dairies and other infrastructure so that they can have a nice big herd and have a really productive farm. They've got that as a debt. They have to keep producing, not to mention they've got a contract with Coles or Woolies or whomever else.
Yeah, they're locked into contracts to supply. And then, but it's not just that as well. You've also got a lot of input costs. So you've got insurance, rising cost of fertiliser. Yeah. You've got to bring in feed. If you can't grow that feed, you're buying it in, and then that's even more expensive. So it's just constant strain on our farmers. And it's unnecessary.
Well, when the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder comes in, just starts buying up water, pushes the price to completely uneconomic levels, where you can't make money as a farmer in many types of crop. All of a sudden, they're stuck between the devil and the deep blue sea, because if they stop producing, they're in breach of contract, and now they're going to get completely screwed over by high-powered lawyers from some multinational corporation that they'd signed a supply contract with. Not to mention they're going to get completely shafted by the banks, who are going to come in and foreclose and everything else. But if they keep producing, the cost of water is so high that they're actually losing money on every single litre of milk. And that's true of all sorts of other crop types as well. It's not just dairy. I'm just using them as the example. And that's where you end up with the sort of heartbreak that we're seeing in a lot of rural communities.
It is, and I think a lot of people don't realise that there's farmers out there that will go season after season for as long as they possibly can at a loss. So they are producing at their own cost to make sure that there's, that produce there for Victorians and for the rest of the country and some parts of the world. Yeah. And it's a lot harder to actually sell up than what it sounds. A lot of people who live in town, okay, things are tough, I'm just going to sell up and I'm going to downsize. It's so hard to do that on a farm, because it's not just a business. You could be employing people, so you've got the guilt of that on your shoulders, that people are losing their own income for their households. You've got your kids. You don't want to rip your kids out of that community that they're establishing as well. And it could be a generational farm. Yeah. It could be a farm that's been your family home that's been there for 6 years, and you're the one that has to kill it off. Yeah. And that would be heartbreaking. And we hear a lot of sort of token mental health kind of slogans. It's okay to not be okay. You're particularly aimed at men and men's mental health. When that day comes around, all of a sudden everyone cares about men's mental health. Let me tell you, if you care about men and women's mental health, but it obviously affects a lot of men, because they are in farming a lot. I mean, looking after your farmers, your food and fibre producers, is going to work wonders for mental health in this country. It is, and it's also, you can't learn what they know from a book. Yeah. And they've inherited so much knowledge from people, their fathers or their mums before them.
Generations.
It is generations they have inherited and learnt this knowledge from, and they've evolved. So the farm itself has evolved over generations to adapt to the climate that they're in. But when a big change like the water comes in, and that's something that just happens all of a sudden and it's permanent, that's something really hard to evolve to. Normally with weather changes, we have time. We have time,
you can adapt.
And it comes in ebbs and flows. Yeah. But it's the kids. The kids also really feel it.
Well, that's right. And I did a video a little while ago titled, Do you really want to know where your food comes from? And I interviewed a number of farmers, and really the mental health aspect of it really came through in that. And, to have these men who are, they've grown up on the land, they work on the land, they're hardy, just incredibly resilient people. I mean, you want to talk about stoicism. The stoicism in these people is incredible, men and women. To have them crying on camera when you ask them about passing the farm on to their kids. Yeah,
it's heartbreaking. And it's just to watch a person like that break down and knowing what they are like. I know farmers. I've been around them my whole life. Yeah. It destroys a person. It can destroy a marriage. It can destroy a family. Yeah. And it really does come at a cost, but it's worth the fight. It is so worth the fight for these farmers and these communities, because they're the salt of the earth. They are the first people that will help you if you're breaking down on the side of the road. If you're in need, they are the first ones there. And
I'll tell you, without them, we go hungry.
We do.
Right? Newsflash, city people, country people can survive without us. We can't survive without them, right? If you haven't thought that through, maybe give it some thought. It's insane to me to think that we would make it hard for people to provide us with food. That has to be one of the most suicidal
un-Australian.
ideas.
It is so un-Australian, I think, not to put farmers, give them the rights that they deserve, that they need, that they should have access to. We need that right to water in order to grow our food. We should, I think it was section 100 of the
Australian Constitution, yes.
Shall not abridge the right to water
Yep.
for farmers and communities.
Yep.
Yet the government has gone ahead and done that.
So we need to come back and get a little bit more technical again for a couple of minutes here, just to fully lay out the picture for anyone that's kind of new to all of this. And obviously there's people, families picnicking around us, so apologies for any noise. But I want to cover the sort of the different competing sections of the basin, because this is important to understand. Not all irrigators are the same, and certainly not all farmers are the same. In fact, there's vast difference. There's plenty of dryland farmers. They might be grazing animals, or they might be dryland croppers, and they're just relying on rainfall patterns. They're relying on the weather, and they can have a lot of really bad years in a row, and then they'll finally get a good one, and make up, pay off a lot of the debts and things, and maybe upgrade a few pieces of equipment, and then batten down the hatches again for potentially another run of bad years. They never know from one year to the next. That's why farmers become irrigators, is to try and create a bit more confidence, a bit more certainty. Consistency. They can then invest more heavily into their infrastructure and their equipment because they know the productivity is going to be there to support the loans and repay, and all of that investment is going to be worth it. When we take away the consistency from the irrigators, when all of a sudden, even though they own permanent water, their allocation year after year might be zero. They still might not. We've almost turned them back into dryland farmers in a sense, where there's that uncertainty and that anxiety and that not knowing from year to year, am I going to be able to actually do this year or not?
Yeah, it baffles me why the government keeps wanting to take more from farmers as our population grows. Farmers need to be able to produce more to support the population, but we're going backwards, and it blows my mind. It really does, because I'm like, how much of a special kind of stupid can our government get? They want more people in, but they're stopping us from feeding them.
Yeah, from being able to,
Yeah, we need to turn it around. We need to make sure that farmers have what they need in order to grow the food to sustain our population.
Yeah.
They want more people. We need to be able to feed them.
So let's talk about I've sort of got four main zones within the basin that I see. One is South Australia itself. So there is a certain amount of water that is required to cross the South Australian border every year. Now that's because Adelaide and a few other towns get their water from the lower Murray down into South Australia. But actually, if you look at the Water Act of 2007, it actually has two very explicit goals built into it. Most of the goals are quite nebulous, improve environmental outcomes. What does that mean? Well, it means whatever they want it to mean. There are two really specific goals, and both of them are to do with the water level and quality in Lake Alexandrina, which is basically the estuary at the very bottom of the Murray River. If you can imagine, if you're in Melbourne, the Yarra River runs into Port Phillip Bay. If you're in Sydney, the rivers there run into the bay. The bay is salt water. If you're in Brisbane, you've obviously got Moreton Bay, etc., before it really gets out to sea. Well, the same is true at the end of the Murray River. It runs into Lake Alexandrina, and that's part of a bigger system. There's Lake Albert off to the side, and then you've got the Coorong, which is a whole other story in and of itself, off to the side. But what's happened in South Australia is they put barrages across, over about 100 years or so ago, they put barrages across the actual, what they're calling the mouth of the Murray, but it's not. It's actually where the estuary meets the ocean. The mouth of the Murray is where it discharges into the estuary. It's at the top of Lake Alexandrina. But they've tried to turn Lake Alexandrina into a permanent freshwater lake. And we have all the historical records. We know that it wasn't historically a permanent freshwater lake. It was a mixed estuary. When there was a big flood coming down the Murray, it would turn quite fresh. When the Murray ran dry, which it literally used to do, there are historic photographs, so I'm sure you would have seen them.
It does, yeah. There was people having barbecues and picnics, or picnics on there
playing
with their
cricket.
horses and carts.
Yeah, playing early forms of cricket on the bottom of the Murray River. It used to literally run completely dry.
Yeah, if they want environmental flow, they have to take into account that that's a natural part of our environment. Yeah, they've forgotten that part
that
too.
boom and bust cycle.
Yeah, it's costing us.
And so Lake Alexandrina, historically, in periods like that, would have just filled up with seawater. The water level would have remained wherever the sea level put it, but it would have been salty. It would have been seawater. But we tried to change that 100 odd years ago, and we put barrages across the front and basically said, well, this has to remain permanently fresh. And that's created a whole range of issues, both for the lake ecology itself around Lake Alexandrina. There's been some real challenges there, but actually that's put an enormous amount of pressure on the rest of the system upstream, because never was this system required to consistently, year after year, provide so much water across the the state boundary into South Australia. That's a new invention. That's something that we've imposed on the river system, where historically it would have been boom and bust. There were years of massive floods and years of literally nothing.
Yeah. But the government interferes and stuffs things up.
That's right. And it was very, very clear that those specific outcomes on Lake Alexandrina were a big part of the objective, the reason why the Water Act of 2007 was even passed. So that's South Australia. Now, they do need fresh water. They also have irrigation and food and fibre in that southeast corner and so forth. They have legitimate needs for water. But in my view, they've been over-prioritised, and there's ways that we can fix that. And this can actually, the good thing about a lose-lose-lose situation is that it's actually possible to create win-win-win outcomes.
We've all got to work together to do it.
We've got to work together to do it. So then you come across the border into Victoria and then obviously New South Wales. Now, I'll talk about Victoria first, and this might upset you a little bit, but of the regulated river systems, so the southern part of New South Wales and the Victorian part of the system, these are the regulated systems. What does that mean? Well, they benefit from things like what's behind us, the Hume Weir in this particular case, but weirs and dams and ways of controlling and regulating the run of the water. And that's where you can get things like water rights and water allocations. The reason why these were built was so that farmers could be given water security. They could know that they were going to get something. There's water in the dam, which means I'm going to be able to get something next year to grow my food, to grow my fibre. Now, one last thing before we come back to Victoria and how I'm going to upset you. In northern New South Wales, you have an area that's unregulated. Now, this is particularly up on the Darling River, and they use a thing called floodplain harvesting. Now, this is because there's no dam big enough to stop these floods. When you have this sort of tropical rainfall that hits inland Australia every 3 to 5 years, there's no stopping that. That's just going to go wherever it wants to go. And so these floodplain harvesters have built these big sort of weirs out of earth that just catch an enormous amount of this water. And so they have certain limits on how much they're allowed to catch, but it's a vast amount of water. Whenever it floods like that, they can grab a lot of water, but then they don't know how many years they're going to have to go without any. And what happens is the people on the regulated system are being told to blame the people on the unregulated end of the system, the floodplain harvesters, every time the water's low. It's because those floodplain harvesters took too much. And the floodplain harvesters are saying, well, no, hang on, most of this wouldn't have made it into your weirs in the first place. A lot of it would have soaked into the ground or would have evaporated. It's not a one-for-one deal. We can grab this much water. It doesn't take that much water off you downstream. And they've kind of got a point. But the piggy in the middle, the ones that really get screwed in my view, are in this southern end of New South Wales. So you've got a bunch of rivers. You've got the Murrumbidgee and Edwards and other Murrumbidgee and others up in that in-between area, and they don't actually really connect into the Murray at all. In fact, a lot of the time those rivers are quite ephemeral in the sense that they kind of just run into marshland and kind of peter out. Obviously during floods that changes. But once you get into the Murray area in New South Wales, see what happens whenever the Darling River runs dry. So the Darling is mostly unregulated, so it'll flood when there's a flood and it'll dry up when there's not. The Darling is no longer contributing water to South Australia, but there's a certain amount of water that has to go into South Australia. And some of that water is meant to come from New South Wales and some of that water is meant to come from Victoria. And the problem is the makeup for that water has to come from the regulated part of New South Wales, because the Darling's inside New South Wales. And so what can happen is people on our side of the river here, or on the New South Wales side here, they're looking across the river, and Victorian irrigators are getting some okay allocations. They're doing all right, and they're standing on dry dirt under the exact same rainfall conditions. Why? Well, because the southern regulated part of the New South Wales system is having to make up for the shortfall because the Darling River is run dry and the Murrumbidgee is disconnected because it's run dry and what have you. And so you can end up with these different groups feeling very, very resentful towards each other. And the government, I think, has made a lot of progress in its agenda by getting everyone to point at each other. But there's a fifth group that is less visible, but it's actually the one that the Murray-Darling Basin Plan puts front and centre, and that's this thing called the environment. Have a guess what the definition, this will be interesting, have a guess what the federal definition of the environment is.
I actually haven't looked at the federal definition.
You know why?
You've got me thinking, because there is none.
Because there is none.
There is none.
There is no definition of the environment. We have a Minister for the Environment federally who does not have a definition of what one of the words in their own portfolio actually means. Now, this is really, really important. This isn't some semantic little game. Because the question of, well, the Minister for the Environment, what are they the Minister for? Where's the boundary between the environment and not the environment? Is it everything? Are they just the Minister for everything? Or is there some boundary? And if we're aiming to help the environment, if we're writing into something like the Water Act of 2007 and the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, that one of our objectives is to improve environmental outcomes, we'd bloody well better be able to define
We do.
What the environment actually is.
That's actually a really good question. I should ask our Minister for Environment.
There may be one in Victoria, I don't know, but federally there is not a definition of what the environment actually is and what it entails. Why does this matter? Is this just some semantic game? Well, the reason why our federal government spent $13 billion of our dollars buying up a bunch of water and making it completely unaffordable for a lot of farmers was in the name of environmental water. This was water that was going to get used for environmental purposes, environmental outcomes. Now, largely what that means is being sent out to run across forest lands and forest floors and wetlands to keep ecosystems alive during times of drought and what have you, which sounds great. But there's a couple of really interesting things about this, which again, remember, there is no definition of what the environment is or is not. When they shut down irrigation channels, which they did a lot of in Northern Victoria, they shut down, I think it was called the Northern Victorian Irrigation Rejuvenation Project, I think was the name of it.
They've done it in Victoria as well, some of them.
Yeah, so
they've piped them instead. So
correct. All right. So what they do is they close down the open channels and they put in pipes and pumps. Now here's the interesting thing. An open channel is going to get used by fish and frogs and birds and reeds and all kinds of things. I've seen irrigation channels that were phenomenal. Like
natural ecosystems. They were
100%.
Yep, native. I've even seen wallabies living in them.
Yep. Now you put that into a pipe with a pump at one end, which is going to macerate the fish. Like, good luck being a fish and getting through one of those pipes. I guess it is fertilizer though. It's just kind of just fish fertilizer being just shoved through the pipes. At that point, any environmental benefits from those irrigation channels is lost. Now, how can you say that what you're doing is for the environment when, number one, you don't have a definition of what the environment is, and every litre of water that's being used over there is no longer available to the environment over here, right? They're literally robbing Peter to pay Paul. One of the great flaws of how we're doing water at the moment is that we do not consider water on a farm to be part of the environment, and that's absurd.
It is absurd. It is. I've seen shovel bills and all, froggers.
Yeah.
These are protected species.
Migrating birds, a lot of them will have ponds within their own farms anyway that will, they'll give it a bit of the overflow water, the excess water that they might have not needed for whatever other purpose.
Even Murray cod have been found in them. There's a lot.
And just the irrigation channels themselves. We're talking thousands of kilometres of channel, a lot of which has now been shut down, particularly in Northern Victoria where they really intentionally went around and did that. And that is a loss to the environment. How can you come out here and tell me that you're doing this for the environment when you are shutting down so much of an ecosystem?
You're destroying the environment.
And let me really piss off everyone in Victoria by defending rice growers, which are generally a bit further north from Victoria. This is irrigation farming, the rice paddies, and I've stood in those at night doing filming, and I'm up to my, I've got gum boots on, and I'm this deep in mud, but underneath the mud is a really rock solid layer of clay, and that's what keeps the water sitting up in the top there. So it's not all just flowing through; it's sitting up there. And I was recording and I was wondering in my head whether I was going to be able to use that footage because the frogs were so loud just all through this rice paddy. These are ecosystems. Nothing in nature goes to waste. So the first thing I would say is a lot of this is being done in the name of the environment, and the government is making everyone point at each other and blame each other, these four different main sort of groups within the system. Actually, they need to be pointing back to the government and saying, explain to us what the environment is.
And what the purpose for this water is.
And tell me why my farm isn't part of it. Tell me why the irrigation channel, why the little billabong that I used to keep when I could afford to, why those things on my farm are not counted when you're looking at environmental outcomes.
A lot of our farmers have been saying that though. They're starting to say.
Yeah, more and more.
They're starting to ask. A lot of them are becoming
Yes.
environmentalists in their own rights as well, it's great. I haven't actually heard of any Victorians complaining about rice farmers though.
Oh, really? Okay, all right.
I did come onto the scene in 2019 and how many rice farmers are left?
Well,
not many.
Not many. There's only a handful.
No,
So then the next interesting thing about the environment side of things is that there's a list of the wetlands that get watered by the the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder, and it gets allocated by the Environment Minister, and there's this whole process that they go through. If you look at the list of wetlands, more than half of them, last I looked into this, which was a couple of years ago now, more than half of them as wetlands became wetlands after humans started messing with the river system, after we started putting in weirs and dams and so forth. So what you're telling me is you can take water away from a man-made channel and not count that against the environment because it's not natural. But then you're going to use it to water a wetland that didn't exist until man made that exist. And that's how somehow this is like a net gain for the environment. This actually cuts at the very heart of the entire thing. This is kind of, you slice through this and the whole thing unravels. What's the environment?
Like I said, they're real special thinkers up there at Canberra.
Yeah, I mean, that should be a dumb question, but actually, in the context of water policy in Australia, the question, "What is the environment?" is actually it's the question. So, what needs to happen, in my view, is all of the water users need to accept that they have been hard done by, but so have all of the other people that they've been blaming up to this point in time. Now, maybe not everyone's been hard done by to the same degree, but can we put that aside and unified turn all of our attention to the actual problem, which is the federal government?
You said you were going to offend me in some way, and I wasn't going to disagree. I'm still waiting for it because I'm agreeing.
So the thing about Victorians being better off than the regulated part of the New South Wales system.
No, and like you said, we all do need to come together.
Yeah.
We really do need to come together, and we do need to look at the cause of this issue, and that is the federal government. They're the ones who have stuffed us over from the beginning.
Now, you and I met because there was a moment in time where that was almost happening. Late 2019, December 3rd and 4th, 2019, there was a 2-day rally held at Parliament House in Canberra, and that's where you and I met for the first time, if my memory serves me correctly. Yeah. I was invited to be the MC of that rally, which I accepted, and was very happy to do that. David Littleproud, who has very little to be proud of, was the water minister at the time, the federal water minister. Scott Morrison had just been elected, the election where he got on the stage and he said, "I've always believed in miracles." And I stood up and I opened that event saying, "Well, Scott Morrison, you've always believed in miracles. We're gathered here because we need a miracle." And that is a change of heart from politicians, a famously difficult thing to get. And regrettably, that change of heart has not been forthcoming. We forced David Littleproud to resign as water minister. He ran away with his tail between his legs a couple of months later, and they installed a new one, Keith Pitt, I think it was.
Yes.
Who then did what they always do. "Oh, I need a few months to get my head around this. I'm new to the portfolio. I'm not responsible for all of the things that have happened in the past. You're going to have to take that up with those people. You need to give me some time to get my head around this." And of course, they play the stalling game, the waiting game, and then all the heat goes out of it. But of course, this thing, I don't know, it probably didn't really make the news much, but this thing called the coronavirus, COVID-19, happened in 2020.
Correct.
And that just sort of sucked all of the oxygen out of this water issue.
Nobody could get together, nobody could protest this. They killed the community, I suppose, that was growing to take on the government. But it also rained.
Well, that's true. That's true. It did, yes.
And things got green. We've had a couple of good years, but we will hit a drought again. And when we hit that drought, I'm hoping that these communities have remembered who their allies are in this fight, and they'll all join again, and they will hold the government to account.
Well, this is the thing. You make hay when the sun shines. If the rain is falling, now is the time to fix water policy so that the next drought doesn't
screw us over.
Irrigators the way that it has. So, in your travels, I've got my own thoughts, but I'd be curious to hear, in your travels, what are some of the short-term things that could be done relatively quickly to ease some of the pressure? And then what are some of the bigger picture things that could actually address this and fix it?
We'll start from the end, I suppose, of that question. Like you said, the states need to get together. They need to sort it out with the federal government. Recognising what actually is environmental water, that will be a big game changer. Yeah. Because I've seen environmental flows destroying and wiping out entire forests. They've overwatered them time and time again. They haven't given them that dry spell. The government's trying to play farmers with our
more specifically, bureaucrats in Canberra who have lived in a bubble their entire lives are trying to pretend that they know enough about these systems to be able to micromanage them and get better results than just random natural processes.
But then that raises a question: are they actually trying to play farmer, or are they pretending to do it and just saying, "Oh, we made a mistake, we didn't know what we're doing"? And they have a bigger objective, is to get rid of those forests.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, let me give you an example of where I think there was some vindictiveness going on. I'm probably going to get dates wrong, but because we're going back in my memory a little bit here. But if my memory serves me correctly, there was a substantial rainfall event, I think in 2016, in the lower regulated system, so along the Murray. It
did not stop raining up here in this area. I think there was only 3 days where the sun shone over winter, and the rest of the day it was just raining.
And that rain didn't extend further north. So the Darling was dry, but the Murray was running hot. Now what happened was there was a substantial flood. A lot of people got flooded, a lot of damage was done, and that water of course has to go somewhere, and ultimately it goes across the South Australian border and out what they call the mouth of the Murray, which is actually the end of the estuary, the Lake Alexandrina estuary, where they've got these barrages. Now there's a funny thing that goes on right at the mouth of that, which is that the ocean is always throwing sand up. You know, the Southern Ocean, the power of the Southern Ocean, they get their weather directly off Antarctica. There's nothing in the way at that part of Australia. And so you've got this powerful Southern Ocean constantly pushing sand back up onto the shore, and they're trying to say, well, this is the mouth of the Murray River. So they've actually got dredgers running non-stop, just having to clear sand out, so that they've got a thing that they can call the mouth of the river, because they blocked it with a weir. They're not allowing the tide to actually scour that and push through back and forth with each of the rise and fall of the tide. So what happened then was there was a little bit of water left in the Menindee Lakes. Now the Menindee Lakes are actually on the Darling. So the Darling was dry, but the Darling has one sort of water storage, one weir kind of like this, and it's called the Menindee Lakes. Now the way it works is most of the water in the Menindee Lakes, if it was full, belonged to the federal government, and then below a certain point where it's pretty close to empty, it belongs to the New South Wales government, and that's for essential supply to towns and so forth that rely on that water supply. So there's this massive flood heading down the Murray River, and the water minister at the time, which was Susan Ley, the former member in this very seat of Farrer where we're sitting right now, and I challenged her on this in person later and she didn't have a good answer for me. The decision was made to release environmental flows out of the Menindee Lakes that were then going to come down the Darling River and meet up with this enormous flood that was coming down the Murray, and then they were both going to join and get pushed out the mouth of the Murray. And the reason this was justified as environmental water was they were going to scour the mouth of the Murray and clear it out and get rid of all of that sand and open it up. Guess how many days went by before they had to restart the dredges? From the end of the flood, I believe, again, if my memory serves me correctly, I believe it was something like 11 days.
Wow, that's not long.
Now, they dumped so much water out of the Menindee Lakes that they triggered the New South Wales ownership level. And what happened then is what I think was the true agenda there. They've been trying to get Broken Hill to rely on water from the Murray River for a very, very long time. And there's this pipeline that's been this political hot potato. And the issue with it was, the counter to it was, that it makes more sense for them to continue getting their water from the Menindee Lakes. Well, once the Menindee Lakes were drained that low, they said, well, we have to complete this pipeline. Now, I don't know why they wanted that pipeline complete, but I'm quite firmly convinced that the dumping of that water, allegedly to get this environmental outcome at the mouth of the Murray, was literally so they could just dump all that water out of there, and then they had the political stick they needed to justify this pipeline project, that it was somebody's pet project the whole way through. The longer I spend in this game, the more cynical I am becoming.
Me too. It just makes you ask more and more questions when you don't get the answers that you deserve.
Yeah.
Of course, you're going to ask more and more questions. You're going to think every direction, okay, why?
Yeah.
And the governments, I think they've got a massive task on their hands, but they deserve that massive task because they're the ones that put us there in the first place.
Well, here's what I think needs to happen. Number one, run of the river needs to be considered environmental water. So what we have is a thing called run of the river. It's basically a base amount of water, because a certain amount of water seeps into the ground and is lost to evaporation, blah, blah, blah. I don't see how keeping the river wet isn't an environmental outcome. I don't see how that doesn't count as environmental water. So what's currently used as run of the river should be made available for allocations, and that can be done instantly. That doesn't even require a change in legislation, and that wouldn't make a huge difference, but it would make a small difference, because honestly, if it's for environmental outcomes wise, then it's coming from the environmental allocation. Secondly, no man-made wetlands should be allowed to be watered with this sort of environmental water. If they want to argue we have ancient wetlands, these are X many thousands of years old, etc., we have to look after them. Okay, you know what? That at least that's something that we can't necessarily replace easily. It takes thousands of years to replace that. But the ones that we made in the last 150 years since we started controlling the water, no, I'm sorry, that argument doesn't apply. So any water that has been used, so if you look at the allocation of water, whatever volume of water has been used on that in the last 5 years needs to be sold back to farmers. It needs to be just gotten out of the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holders' hands immediately.
I'm not going to object to that one bit at all.
Yeah. Then a lot of the environmental impact and the environmental benefits of having water on farms needs to be recognised. So if you're shutting down 1,000 kilometres, 1,000 linear kilometres of channels in the name of saving the environment, well, you've just removed 1,000 kilometres worth of creek line, essentially, as far as the environment is concerned. So I would love to see the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder actually opening up to farmers to say, well, hey, do you have some environmental projects for water on your farm? Do you have a lake you want to maintain? Are there some wetlands on your farm that you could actually be looking after? Let's actually start getting water back on farms in the name of the environment and in the name of some of those environmental outcomes. But probably the biggest one, the one that upsets people the most, but the one that gives us the most opportunity, is to return the lower lakes, that's Lake Alexandrina and Lake Albert, to being estuaries, which is what they always were. Now, before South Australian viewers get on the keyboards and start going at me, let me talk you through this a little bit, because there's a lot of misconceptions about the lower lakes, the Coorong, where that water comes from, where it used to come from. So when settlers first arrived and started to document and map the southeast corner of South Australia, Lake Alexandrina, Lake Albert, the Coorong, and all the lands to the southeast, they were marshlands. There were the records. One diary states that water could be found anywhere at a trivial depth. Another one implied that they would literally scoop out the soft dirt and pick it up, and the hole left by the hand would fill with water. So this was essentially a bog. It was marshland, but it was incredibly fertile. And so the settlers at the time said, hey, if we can figure out how to drain this water, we're going to have really rich, fertile farmland. And they do. The land down there is amazing. So what they did, that water didn't used to drain into the ocean, even though the ocean's actually closest. Due to the way the sort of the natural lay of the land had formed over time, that water would actually move to the southwest and would end up running into Lake Albert. So fresh water was continuously running off the land into Lake Albert. It would flow from there into Lake Alexandrina. Lake Alexandrina was also getting water when the Murray flowed from the Murray. And between them, that was mixing with seawater coming in at the mouth, and that's what created the estuary environment inside Lake Alexandrina. Lake Albert was originally fresh because of this water pushing its way off that bog, off that marshland continuously. What they did in order to drain that land was they needed to find something lower than Lake Albert. It wasn't draining fast enough into Lake Albert. And so what they did was they created the drains that still exist to this day, there's a heap of them, that directly drain water off that land straight out to the ocean. Now, that's fresh water that should have stayed on our continent, that had one more job to do, looking after that ecosystem in Lake Albert. And I'll get to the Coorong in a second as well. And so instead they're taking this precious fresh water, and they didn't know any better, we're talking 150 years ago, and they're dumping beautiful fresh water directly out into the ocean.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
How long will that take to return it to that system?
Well, we can't necessarily return it exactly to that system because the water level issue is real. If you try and drain that water into a lake that's sitting quite high, the water won't move and you end up with a bog again. So that's a real issue. But for example, draining it directly into Lake Alexandrina, which historically is at a lower level than Lake Albert, and some of it into Lake Albert, or actually the better plan is to drain that fresh water into the far end of the Coorong. The idea, so all of the current work and the current planning around preserving the Coorong, rescuing the Coorong, it's this hypersaline environment, it's this Ramsar listed natural wonder, and it's become basically an uninhabitable environment because it's just become so salty. Why has that happened? Well, because the water that used to drain off the marshland into the top end of the Coorong and would then slowly push its way, the fresh water would slowly push its way out towards the mouth, that got stopped because that land got drained. That water got taken off through the other drains directly into the ocean. Now there was no water to flow off the land into the Coorong. The Coorong lost its freshwater supply 150 years ago. And we need to redirect the drains that are currently going out to the ocean. Some of them need to be directed into Lake Albert, and some of them need to be directed into the Coorong, to actually get some fresh water coming back in at the top of the Coorong to begin to push out this hypersaline water and restore that back to what it could be, which is more like Lake's Entrance down in Victoria. You think about Lake's Entrance, right? Beautiful place, incredibly rich with bird life and fish life and everything else. That's what the Coorong should be. That's what it has been in the past, and it is a little bit from time to time, but the water has become so salty because what happens is it's only seawater that gets in there, and then that evaporates, and so that leaves a higher density of salt, and then more seawater flows in and that evaporates, and now you've got, it's like the Dead Sea in Israel, right? You've just got this environment that is becoming saltier than the ocean. It is hypersaline, and we fix that by introducing fresh water from where it used to come from those low-lying lands. And we can do that just by redirecting the drains that are currently dumping into the ocean. Can you believe on this continent we're dumping fresh water into the ocean on purpose? It's insane. So let's use that water better. So what I'm not saying when it comes to the lower lakes is that we're going to turn them into some sort of environmental wasteland. In fact, I think they're going to environmentally improve. I think they're going to get a lot better environmentally. But what that does more than anything else is it dramatically cuts the amount of evaporation of fresh water. Because what's happening right now, Lake Albert, Lake Alexandrina, between them are very, very large. And in that part of South Australia, evaporation is very, very high. They get a lot of sunshine. And so every year we're losing approximately 2 Sydney harbours worth of fresh water, because remember, it's all being fed by the Murray River, just to evaporation.
That's so much irrigation water. That's so much that we could use to grow produce.
That is so much food, so much fibre. That is so much cheaper prices on the supermarket shelf when you go to buy something, when you go to feed your family. And so by reconfiguring the lower lakes, and yeah, there's going to be some other work to do as well. Right now, the town of Goolwa gets its water out of Lake Alexandrina. If we're going to let that become an estuary, we need to build a new pipeline, etc. So there's some real work that needs to be done. But that can be funded by selling water allocations.
Yeah,
because you've got 2 Sydney harbours worth of water every year. You sell that to farmers as a permanent water allocation. You're going to get your money. You're going to get your budget to be able to do all of that work, even with the fact that water prices will come down, which is the point. We want water prices to come down to affordable levels. So that as a structural fix. And I think what you would have to do is allow South Australia to benefit financially from the sale of that water, etc. I think that's how you would win them over on a budget level. And perhaps even they own a certain amount of the permanent water and they get to sell that as temporary water and make money out of that every year. We make it a sweet deal for South Australia and for their budget bottom line. But then an enormous amount of water is now available to irrigators further upstream. What that instantly does is it reduces a lot of the finger pointing, a lot of the fighting, a lot of the angst goes out of it. If people are not fighting for their survival, they'll fight a lot less. And we can start to solve a lot of these other problems and answer a lot of these other questions because a lot of that intensity will have come out of the fight at that point. So there's other things that I think need to be done as well, but really that is the source of the problem. It's the end of the river is the source of the problem. And I think we see that legislatively as well. I mentioned before, the lower lakes have 2 specific KPIs mentioned in the legislation. Nothing else has that in the Water Act of 2007. Why? Well, because it was all about keeping South Australia happy, and unfortunately that was done at the expense of so much of the rest of the system. And now with the cost of living the way that it is, and our food security declining the way that it is, that's happened at the cost of us all.
It has. And that was a long time ago when that went up.
Well, the barrages went up, I think it was the 1920s and 30s, I believe.
So
it was around about 100 years ago.
It's 100 years old.
Yep.
We've come a long way since then.
Yep.
We've got a lot more people here. Our farmers are leaving in droves. We're losing so many farmers. Yes, the farms are still there, but they're getting bigger. So the farming population is getting smaller, but the farmers that are remaining, they're having to get bigger. So we're seeing more factory-style farming.
Yep.
And I think that's a bit unfortunate because the smaller the farm, the more personalised it is, and it brings back that community spirit because you'll have more people living in those smaller communities, and we're seeing those communities turn into ghost towns at the moment. We want to rejuvenate them.
Now this is a funny one to balance. It's worth us talking about because obviously economies of scale, farms getting bigger, equipment getting more efficient, etc. That's a good, or it should be a good thing. We should see that reflected in lower prices on the shelves. That should be the silver lining. But when their water and their fertiliser and the fuel that goes into those machines has all gone through the roof, now we have the worst of both worlds, where they're no longer being efficient and that leads to lower prices. They're being efficient as a matter of survival, and prices are still going up, and then they get blamed.
But it's also taking the passion out of farming. When you have those farmers who are passionate, the smaller the farm, well, you don't have to be tiny, but it has to be a reasonable size. They're maintaining that passion for the work that they do, and then when they get to a certain size, then it's just all about business, and it really takes the soul out of our rural communities.
And it's that thing of people who really know their land. Like there's something really beautiful about that. And then the community impact can't be overstated here. And this was one of the 3 objectives of the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. It was going to get a triple bottom line: good for irrigators, good for communities, and good for the environment. Well, they've screwed the environment, they've screwed the irrigators, but the communities are suffering because all of a sudden they don't have enough people in the area for the cricket team. They don't have enough kids to get funding for a local school.
We're shutting schools down.
You know, yeah, shutting schools
Even police
down.
stations now are
You know,
being shut down.
doctors can't survive economically out there because there's just not enough people. So now these people have to travel an extra hour further to just for a doctor's appointment. You know, grocery stores, little corner stores can't survive. My brother was the pastor in Bort for many years. He was the Baptist pastor there, and I used to come out from time to time, not often, but there was a little corner store there, or a little like milk bar type store there that I'll never forget. Because of the nature of the town, they had to offer everything. And so they had the freezer with the ice creams, and they had the fryer with the chips, and they had the this and the that and the that and the that. And Stephen said to me one time that he'd chatted with the owner, and the owner was saying, I'm having to start to shut some of these things down because I can't justify the electricity.
Yeah.
I can't run a freezer with ice creams in it to sell 10 ice creams a week. And so now all of a sudden the local kids don't have ice creams on a hot day.
No, well, the remaining local kids.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You know, and Bort's a beautiful place, and I'm led to believe it's actually doing reasonably well. It's a part of the world that's kind of doing okay, but there's a lot of towns that aren't. Or is that not true?
No, there is a lot of towns. I can use my own one that I moved to in Invergordon.
Okay.
Had a little school when we moved there, and within the 12 months it shut down.
Yeah.
So that's just sitting there dormant now. It's a really good facility.
Yep.
There is only one little general store, and that's also the petrol station. I'm not sure how they're going. They're still open. I'm surprised that they're still open, but it's more farmers have left. There's a oval. There was a footy team, not anymore. I think the cricket team, I think it's only one grade of cricket that they've managed to get together.
Yep.
And
at that point,
really
they've just got to take anybody, and they're not necessarily going to be competitive, which means it's not necessarily fun, and you just get this down, a loss of community spirit. You know, footy teams, cricket teams, netball teams, these are often sort of the heartbeat, the weekly heartbeat of the town is showing up for those events, and they talk and they have a barbecue and these sorts of things. And this isn't just nostalgia. This is what makes life. This is what makes Australia what it is, the culture that we have, and it's being lost.
One hub where you're guaranteed to find that old school Australian culture still thriving is in our rural communities, and we're just losing it because they're leaving in droves.
And then, sorry to bring it back to politics, but as your population moves more towards your cities, the boundary lines of your lower house seats in Parliament also change. And we've got a situation, I can't speak at a state level, but at a federal level, we've got a situation where there are hardly any lower house seats in country Victoria. They're almost all concentrated around Bendigo, Ballarat, Geelong, and mostly Melbourne, because that's where the population is. And stays the same? Yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, but with the upper house, it's really good. I was talking with some colleagues today, and with New South Wales in state for their upper house, they don't have regions like we do here in Victoria.
Yeah.
And my argument was, it's better in Victoria because we at least have that representation of our regional upper house seats.
Member, yeah.
So we've got Western region, Northern region, Eastern region.
Yeah.
So you're guaranteed at least 15 voices.
Yeah.
I think. Yes.
Yeah, because those seats, the boundaries of those seats aren't being changed with the population movement.
Exactly.
They're kind of fixed geographically.
So you've got those 15 members for the regional areas that will be the voice for regional Victoria in the upper house.
But this is the challenge. I'm going to go back to federal numbers because I know them better. The challenge that we've got is in Melbourne, Geelong, Bendigo and Ballarat, there were more Greens voters, just Greens voters, in those population centres than there are total numbers of voters outside. Right, so just get that in your head for a second. If you want to get elected, you want to form government, you want to be in power in this state, do you care about the voters in regional areas who are talking to you about issues like water and food and fibre and security and all of that stuff? Or are you going to pander to the Greens? There are more Greens voters in the city than there are total number of voters outside. It's a terrifying thought. The same's actually true in New South Wales. New South Wales, Newcastle, Sydney, Wollongong, that's really what it stands for. It's the population centres. There are more Greens voters inside Newcastle, Sydney and Wollongong than there are total voters west of the dividing range. That's when you then when you understand that, you realise why things like water and irrigation issues just don't get traction politically. It's such a difficult problem to solve because there isn't a political incentive for them to solve it. So what's needed is for people like me who don't have a connection to the land, city slickers who just want to know that our farmers are being looked after. They're providing us with food security. You know, we're going to need them in the future if there's a major global conflict. But you know what? We need them day to day. We need that affordable food. Families need it, pensioners need it, retirees need it, young people starting out in life need to be able to go to the supermarket and get fresh, good quality food at an affordable price. And these people are willing to do that for us if we'll just give them the inputs. Let them get, not even give them, that's the wrong phrase. Let them get the inputs at an affordable price.
Yeah.
That's literally
access
it.
to those resources that they need.
Yeah.
They need them to grow this produce to feed us.
Yeah, and they can't, they don't have the numbers to make political change. It's one of the reasons why I got involved way back in 2009 originally, and then 2011 really got into the irrigation side of things. It's one of the reasons why I'm still talking about this to this day. They can't, politically speaking, they don't have the numbers to get this change to happen on their own. They need us to actually start to care and to get involved. So hopefully today's video has kind of, I don't know, briefed you, brought you up to speed.
A long briefing.
A long briefing.
It's a very complex issue. It's very complex.
It is, and I just realised I've been putting you in the shade this whole time.
No, okay.
Sorry about that. It has. No. It's been. We've been talking long enough that the sun is in a very different position to what it was when we started. Now, one last question for you.
Yes.
How do you feel about pink?
I love pink.
You love pink? I thought you would.
Good.
I thought you'd like pink. So this is one of the new ones. On the front. If I can get my fingers to work.
Oh, I love that.
It says think free.
That's what I've been telling kids in Victoria.
All right. I don't know if you're going to love this though. This is a bit more confrontational.
People break bad laws. I'm totally up for
Yeah.
that.
All right. You're going to wear that in public. You're going to.
Yeah.
You could be seen wearing that. Well, there you go, Rikkie. Thank you for all the work. Am I going to have to fill out like a declaration form that I've like donated to a politician? Are you going to have to like declare this as a declared gift or something?
No.
Okay.
Look, we're public. Hey, look.
Yeah. There you go. There you go. Well, always a pleasure. Was there anything else you wanted to add before we call it a day on this topic?
Call it a day on this topic. It depends when this is going to get aired.
Well, pretty soon, the next couple of days.
Soon?
Yeah.
Well, we've got the opportunity to make big changes here in Victoria.
That's true.
Yeah, One Nation's doing a great job at the moment. If you don't know what One Nation's actually about, we are a voice of the people. So what I'm saying in Parliament is simply a reflection of the people that I'm talking to on the ground.
Yeah.
I'm not driven by, like a lot of people think, oh, Pauline tells you what to do. No, as long as I do the right job by my constituents, then I won't hear from her. And I haven't heard from her, so that's really good. But we are, our job is to be the voice of the people. So that's what all of our policies are, and I think I'm doing a really good job because I am being that voice that they need. I want more voices in Parliament, so please, can I have some colleagues? That would be great.
We'll try and make that happen.
Yeah, I've managed to achieve quite a bit in there this year on my own, or this past term, sorry, on my own. But we've got Victoria coming up.
Yeah.
Followed
November.
by New South Wales state election, and then the federal one.
Federal, yeah, before May 2027.
Yeah, so there is a great opportunity to fix the issue that we've got sitting behind us, which is the water system. If they put One Nation in leadership for all three, could you imagine the changes that we could make?
It'd be phenomenal. And can I say, I should have actually mentioned earlier, massive credit to Malcolm Roberts, federal senator for One Nation, or he would hate me for saying that, senator for the people of Queensland. Yeah. And he's right. I mean, he's right to correct me on that, but he's a phenomenal guy. And I spent 3 days flying around in a little tiny plane with him, because he wanted to understand the Murray-Darling Basin issue. He had his constituents up in Queensland, who are largely floodplain harvesters, being accused by people further south in the system, and then they would turn around and say, no, we're not doing anything wrong, and blah, 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 here's our side of things. And he's like, no, I want to go and meet everybody. And we flew to South Australia. We covered Northern Victoria, we covered New South Wales, we did Southern Queensland, all in 3 days, just bouncing like a frog in this light plane that was flown by Chris Brooks. And the work ethic on that guy blew me away. And Richard, his advisor, just an incredible team. And I watched him listen intently. And then he would ask me questions. I was sort of there as a sort of subject matter expert, I guess. And he would grill me, and he was putting the pieces together. That thing that farmer up there said, and this farmer down here said, that's just the opposite view of the same event, isn't it? Yep, that's all right. And putting all the pieces together. They actually care. This is the thing. Like Malcolm on that trip brought me around to One Nation.
Yep, they're the people like that. They're the reason why I joined the party too.
Yep.
The policies and their track record. They listen to the people and they act on that.
Yep.
And that's why I joined the party.
Yep. No, I think in order to get real movement on this water issue, we are going to need to see state and federal governments working together. Yep. And I don't think that's going to happen until we see One Nation either in a powerful coalition position or outright in government,
and
one or the
that
other.
makes our party unique.
Yeah.
I've seen, I've got colleagues down here from Queensland helping me out over the next couple of days, and I can pick up the phone and I can talk to any of our elected members all over Australia. Colleagues that I've got in the major parties here in Victoria, they don't know the phone number or the names of other members of their parties in other states.
Yeah.
And I think that's rather heartbreaking, but it's also a clear example of why One Nation's the better choice, because we work together as a team. Because we see the issues, okay, we have to do this together on a federal and state level. Let's get to it.
Well, one last thing. How do you feel about the coming election? You'd have to be feeling pretty good about your chances of re-election, surely.
Yeah, but I'm not going to take it for granted.
Oh, of course not. No.
Working my butt off until election day. But I am confident that I'll be getting a couple of colleagues at least. A couple. That would be great. The numbers are varying. I don't go off the polls.
No.
The only poll that matters is at election
it's polling day.
Yes, polling day. But we're looking good. The team that we've got ready to go, all our candidates, really good, well-grounded Aussie people.
I interviewed Warren Pickering, who's obviously taking a leadership role there. I interviewed him, probably 2 weeks ago. Yeah, and he's under a lot of pressure. There's a lot of people saying, why haven't you announced all of your candidates yet? And it's like, well, do you want them to do a rushed announcement, or do you want them to do a good job of vetting them and selecting them?
And it's unfair on the candidates if we announce them all at once, because then people are inundated with candidates. They don't get the opportunity to get a little bit more personal with the first lot and then the second lot and so on.
And also, let these candidates have their moment in the sun. Like, you've got to play the game. The media side of things is important. The social media side of things is important. If you try and say everything all at once, it all gets lost. You say one thing after another over a period of time, well, you've got a better chance of getting through. So, look, good luck to you personally.
Thank you.
I'm happy to call you a friend and a fellow warrior on this water issue. And I've been saying for a while, I want this water issue to come back to the top of the pile rather than being in the back, and it got shoved to the back by COVID. So I'm happy to be a part of this, and hopefully we can help get this on the front burner. And if One Nation do well in the coming couple of years, let's actually fix this.
Oh, for sure, it needs to be fixed. I want to see this place thriving again, like I've heard it did in the past.
Yeah. Well, I was born in Corowa, just up the river here, and I can tell you, it's the size of the towns, the communities, the footy clubs, all of that was incredible. The number of kids that were running around the town of Waganya, that's where my grandparents lived. You'd go out and play on the street, and you just end up with random other kids playing with you because they were out on the street playing as well. That was back in the day before we all got locked inside by fear and paranoia. It's a beautiful thing, and that for me is the most authentic Australia that I've ever known in my lifetime was Corowa and Waganya and those families and those thriving communities, and you'll be hard pressed to find one now.
No, exactly, and that's why I'm here. I want to see that brought back, so I'm going to work my butt off until I see it happen.
Well, the sun's going down, which I think is telling us we probably need to shut up and go home. Thanks everyone for watching this special report of the Topher Project with Rikkie-Lee Tyrell MLC. See you next time.
Well, thank you so much for watching. I really enjoyed that chat with Rikkie-Lee Tyrell, sort of going back to my roots a little bit, and I know I kind of monopolised the conversation, but she did ask me. She asked me to come along and explain, and well, I hope I did a good job of that and that you understand more about that topic now than you did before, and just how important it is and why it is that this is one of those topics that we can't leave to the people that it affects directly. There just aren't enough irrigators to be able to fight this issue. We, city people, non-irrigators, need to get alongside them and help them to win for the sake of us all. Before I let you go, don't forget, if you are a small, or if you know somebody who is a small, the small size is all we have left in this beautiful original Good People Break Bad Laws hoodie with the Topher field on the sleeve. It is absolutely lovely. It's a lovely garment, and only small is left in stock. They're on sale now for $99. We do have all the t-shirts apart from the extra large in the men's cut. This is $19. We are doing a run out. $19. We're never going to repeat this. And in the ladies cut, we actually have all the sizes available, and they are also $19. So guys, head over to the link in the description. Make sure that you get something for yourself, get something for someone that you love, for the wife, for a partner, for a relative or a friend. Make sure you grab those hoodies, because once they're gone, they're gone. That original design will never be coming back in that form. So guys, I really appreciate the support. While you're there, do check out my books, my DVDs, and all my other merch, my caps, stickers, everything else, and make sure that you do grab what you like, because not everything stays in stock forever, and everything you buy, of course, helps me to keep the Topher Project going and growing in 2026 and beyond. And finally, thank you for watching to the end. I mean it. The algorithm loves it when you do this, and so do I. So please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and as always, think free.